This is Recording to the Cloud, week 2, R622. And I was just saying that, the authors of the articles for weeks 1 and 2 are pretty profound people. Or, John Seeley Brown this coming week, you look him up. I mean, he just goes by JSB. He's like Madonna in Pink, in the music world. He just goes by JSB. So, really, he's been at the forefront of many innovations in terms of technology, running Xerox Palo Alto Research Lab, as well as the theoretical side. And his book on the social life of information is something I used in my social context for learning class. How Xerox repair people get most of their information to fix Xerox copiers at the water fountain, or in Milwaukee, we call it a bubbler. I'm not sure if Michigan uses the term bubbler, but Christy probably has not heard that word, but it is it's a Midwest term, only in Milwaukee, I guess. But he became famous for many things, including the theory of situated cognition. So this coming week, I definitely look at Article 2. And if you're interested in open education, the podcast show we did with David Wiley, who's kind of the founder of Open Textbooks Project, might be eye-opening for some of you. That's the 4th thing listed. There's not much listed in week 2 for learning theories. I've kind of overplayed week 1 and underplayed week 2. So, if you didn't get through everything in week 1 that you wanted to read, go back and read some of the week 1s, and it'll count for week 2, because they're really, really seminal pieces in week 1. And I kind of surprised myself when I looked at the syllabus and opened it up and started reading it myself. I was, surprised I had so many people in week 1. I must have did that last fall, because I don't remember doing it this summer when I was updating the syllabus. So it must have been something, or maybe Dr. Brush, when he taught the course, had front-loaded week 1 and I just followed what he was doing. That could be. Probably not. I don't think Dr. Brush is as mean as that. I think I'm the mean person here assigning all those articles in week 1, but you have a chance to catch up. In fact, you can read from Dr. Brush next week in week 3, a couple of different articles, along with his colleague John Say at University of Auburn. And we have a whole stream of other things. We get into formal K-12 learning environments next week. This week is, again, an extension of learning theories and the foundations of learning environments. And I think across those readings and across our guest speakers over the next 14 or 15 weeks, we will get a sense of what the field of learning environments is all about. Does anyone have a question about the syllabus or about the readings, logistics, or suggestions?
Dr. Bonk, I do not have a question, but I just wanted to tell you kind of a interesting story. Today we had our first day of in-service, and they were talking about some of our outcomes, and they were talking about specifically that they'd seen a lot of excellent, like they piloted a program where they had welding students come in during the summer, like a 6-week intensive, and they actually did in-seat classes, and it was a company that was basically salarying them or paying them to not only attend classes, but paying for their classes. And they were talking about the context. And I immediately, my provost was giving the talk, and I immediately pulled out my computer and I sent him a copy of the situated cognition, because I had read that, because I'm week 2. And I'm like, this is why you're having such great outcomes. It's because in my response, I likened that theory to tradespeople, the apprenticeship type thing. And so it just made a lot of sense to me, and he thought it was a good read. So just a side note.
It's a good endorsement of week 2, article number 2, by all means. And if you want to learn or read more in the field, take a learning sciences course with Dr. Hickey in particular, or any of them, because they'll emphasize that learning in a context, social cultural theory of learning. There's a course I used to teach called P640, Thinking and Learning in Social Contexts, that I no longer teach since I moved to IST, unfortunately. But okay, I got enough other things to do. But it was one of my favorite courses that I had designed and taught for a long time. So I also point out, and I mentioned it in my email, that at 7 o'clock we'll have a guest. And I've invited former students of mine and others to attend. and they're going to pick whatever weeks they want to come to. I send them the whole list, and people I've sent it to. So I wouldn't be surprised if the week that we have Dr. Dady in from Harvard, we get a lot of people who come and attend that, because he's a pretty world famous guy. Maybe for Dr. Paul Kim next week. I think Bo will confirm. Is Paul Kim the speaker for next week? My brain's just focused on this week. So, and he'll talk a little later in the evening, because he's flying in from out of country, and so he asked to be at like 8:30 or something like that. Bo, is that right? I'm making Bo pay attention here.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, so that is.
Sorry, I was admitting people in.
Yeah, 8 o'clock. We got a lot of people here, and thank you for joining us. I see that we have a number of people who are even just auditing or just sitting in, as well as those that are enrolled. And Bob is with us here from San Diego. I hope I don't bore you to tears, because some of what I'm going to talk about, not all of it, is going to be reflective of my model, one of the models from the Saturday class, but maybe it's good for you to get the update of it as well, and the update in terms of the research and what wraps around it. I've tried to update with brand new things, about 30% of it the other night. So I don't want Bob to be bored. So next week, I'm thinking about I'm probably not going to get through all this. I'll probably present on this, but if I get through all this, next week I might talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, or the design of instruction related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. If not, I'll do it the week after. I was asked to give that talk to people at the University of North Texas back in the spring, and they enjoyed it. So I assume it's halfway decent. And I've only presented it once, maybe once, I think. So we'll see if well, maybe I'll update it during the week. We'll see. Okay, so any other questions or comments? Claudia, it's good to see you. Emily, Michelle, Emmanuel. Emmanuel, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do have a question. I was wondering about the so for the readings, I think you were saying if we attended the Zoom sessions, how does that work with the discussions?
If you attend 10 or more of these Zoom sessions, I've added a couple too. You'll notice 1 week in November, we have 3 different nights that we're going to meet, because people wrote me back and said yes. The very last speaker just happened to email me about something else, and then I clicked in my head that he's a pretty famous guy. We want to bring him in too. His name is David Gibson, and so there might be more. As Bill pointed out, things will evolve in here. So if you attend 10 or more of these sessions, you don't have to participate in the online participation to get participation points. You'll get maximum points, and Bill will keep track of who's attending. So he'll mark it down. And you're encouraged to go to the discussion list to read what's going on in there and participate where you want to, but you don't, you can decide where and when you want to do. I'm making virtual, async, or synchronous attendance. It's the first time I'm trying this, and I'm seeing a lot of people show up. Christy was talking about this too in the discussion board, how to get people to show up for synchronous sessions, and this is one way. Emily Virgo had her hand up. Emily?
I think I might have just been reaching for my water.
Okay. Good to see you again, Emily.
Thank you. Good to be back with you.
Yes. It's great to have some former students in this class. And Rachel, I will be in DC at the end of October. We'll talk. Okay, I'm going to call up my slides here. If it will allow me to do so, let's show all windows. There we go. It's always the last one in the list, and you have to flip to another screen. But back when Bob was taking my 546 class, and I think Linda was taking that class, and maybe 1 or 2 others, I came up with a new scheme or a new model to think about education. Some of you know I have a book called Adding Tech Variety, and I'll present on the Tech Variety framework for motivation online. I presented yesterday medical people in Glasgow, Scotland, in fact, at a medical conference virtually. And I have another model called Read, Reflect, Display, and Do, or R2D2. And I have other models just trying to get more interaction, collaboration, engagement in online environments. We have to think about the big picture overall. And so I have what's called Education 2020 model, like 2020 vision. I was planning to write a book in the year 2020, and I never wrote it. It's still in my head somewhere, waiting to pop out, one of these days. But other things took precedence during the pandemic, like 4 other books, 2 special journal issues, and 50 journal articles. So I just didn't have the time to squeeze in another book. Don't know why. I'd rather write poetry or something else. So, this is still in fermentation. It's still something that's in process. And writing is always reprocessing. Everyone reprocesses. In fact, when I was a writing researcher, my dissertation is computers and writing, and I developed the reprocessing model of writing way back in a long time ago, and the generative evaluative model of writing for creativity and critical thinking and so forth. If you're a writing person who would like to read those, I'd be happy to share them with you in the chat window. If you could put, not in Padlet, in the chat window, if you could put some principles that you prefer, or maybe even better yet, in the Jamboard. Bo will get us a Jamboard, but first of all, in the chat window, we can always port it over to the Jamboard. So Bo will create a little Jamboard for us for asking questions. But in the chat window, if you could post down a learning principle or concept or an idea that you find important in your teaching or learning, what is critical to create the ambiance for effective, engaging instruction? Okay. And, it's more than one thing, of course, but, I'm going to go on beyond this. So I'm going to talk about the jobs that are changing in our front of our eyes and those that changed way back when you were growing up. And then I'll talk about Education 2020 and the last principles of instruction. David Merrill has the first principles. I have the last principles. When I was I've got to stop this for a second. When I share my screen, I have to optimize sound or you're not going to hear anything in there. So let me try it again. And I may have sound in here. Nope, no sound. I was in Taiwan maybe 10 years ago talking to Confucius about books. Everyone in Western, or in Eastern culture respects their teachers, and they read the books and they reverberate it back. I was talking to Confucius about this, and he didn't talk back to me. I don't know why. So anyways, let's move on. Times have changed. We've moved away from recitation models of teaching and learning towards collaborative, towards more interactive, towards global. The jobs that existed when I was growing up, and maybe one other person in the room can remember them. Maybe Bob remembers the milkman, the cobbler, the chandler, the TV repairman. None of the rest of you will at all. But those jobs are gone, and there are many more that are leaving us because we're no longer needing people to be taught in an industrial model, to be shaped and shipped off to work in corporate America for the rest of their lives. Today, we're learning all sorts of new ways. These are kids learning during the polio pandemic in the 1930s. There are people learning during the COVID pandemic in a totally different way, but this is correspondence and television-based forms of learning, which saved my life and got me into grad school. When we moved from the 1930s and 40s into the 50s and 60s and 70s, we started experimenting with how technology could enhance teaching and learning. And in the 60s, people in Illinois were pretty ingenious, and they created something called the Plato system. The Plato system enabled online messaging and gaming and asynchronous discussion forums like we have here in Canvas, and remote screen sharing and multiplayer online games and picture-based languages. You name it, it had it. Touch screens. If you want to get the book related to that, it's called the Bright Orange Glow, or the Friendly Orange Glow. It's a thick book by Brian Deere, and I've got a copy of it to lend out if you want. It summarizes all the key players in the movement towards technology-enhanced learning from the 1970s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even to the 90s. Dr. Marty Siegel, whose office I assumed in IST, worked at the Plato Project. He actually worked with incarcerated people in Illinois in the prisons and gave them computers to work on. People were worried that they would, cause havoc and break these computers, but they didn't. So they wanted to save it because they were one chance to learn. while they were incarcerated. The Plato Project did a lot of different things. And Dr. Siegel is, by the way, still in Bloomington. I brought him into one of my classes 2 or 3 years ago. He retired last year. I could bring him in here and we could chat about Plato if you're interested, and about all the things he developed after Plato. But you can see, it had multi-user computing. It had email. I mean, email started with the Plato Project. I mean, a lot of things. And then in the 1980s, early 80s, we started getting into these, things like VisiCalc and Lotus 123 and all these desktop programs. I was using VisiCalc myself as an accountant way back in the day. It was called the killer app. And Bob is the only one who remembers that as well. We get into today, we move fast forward 30 years. And now we're into the age of artificial intelligence and how it's transforming everyone's lives right in front of our eyes. It's transforming the workplace, the schools, the institutions, the organizations, all of society, in effect. And as that happens, people are being displaced or will be displaced. We're not really exactly sure where it will happen the most, but it's going to, the numbers indicate it's white-collar positions. People who have a degree or a postgraduate degree of some sorts will be the first ones out. Former accountants like myself will be replaced by AI technologies and other kinds of technologies rather quickly. The knowledge workers out there, according to a McKinsey report a couple months ago, there's a boom in AI, generative AI, and that will usher in a new era of productivity. And with that new productivity, we're not going to need the people that are in the current positions as much anymore. And so, there's going to be a slew of new reports on what jobs are going to be eliminated. But you can see here, it's people with master's degrees, PhDs, and bachelor's degrees are going to see the most displacement, where AI will increase the vulnerability the most. Not those at the lower end without a high school degree. They've already been displaced in many ways, shapes, or forms. The big losers are those with education. So unfortunately, Bo's still trying for his doctorate, but okay. So he might remember these old clunky computers, probably not, but the first Macs and the first laptop computer were pretty much back then. First personal computers cost you $2,500, and all it could hold is one floppy drive of about 100K, or at the most, it was two floppy drives of 64K each, so it was 128. Couldn't even handle one PowerPoint slide back then. But times have changed. We fast forward to today. Today we're in, we got supercomputers in our, on our beings, just sitting here, this smart computer in my pocket. We're all sitting here with technology that's so far advanced beyond what anyone thought would be possible, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But today, anyone can learn anything from anyone else at any time. That's the premise of My World is Open book. And that's the premise of much of education today, is getting learning out to the masses in a global way through online, blended, massive, open, distance forms of education. And during COVID, it disrupted things, right? Kids started learning in different ways, maybe not separated by desks. They're probably not even in a classroom for the most part, right? They're learning at home. And, some kids were actually thriving despite all the media coverage of the lower test scores and the problems of, getting kids access at home, and, all the time of day, sharing their computers with their siblings and their parents, and also some kids were thriving. And so we have to learn from them, but at the same time, we had basic test scores indicating there's huge problems in reading scores and writing scores and math scores. So who is right? What is really happening out there? Hard to tell, really, what's going to happen out there. At the same time, all this is happening, people are living longer. People are living longer lives. And, healthcare is such that, people are having extended lifespans, and therefore they're going to want to continue to learn throughout their lifespans. So we have to think about lifelong learning. We have to think about the 60-year curriculum. We have to think about new formats for education beyond the traditional birth to age 22 education that's existed for such a long time. So, we have to think about the 100-year life. We also have to think about the 60-year curriculum. My former student, Rovi Brannon, wrote a book, or at least an article in the book, about the 60-year curriculum, about, universities engaging people beyond that. And, some folks are talking about the fourth industrial age, moving, beyond the third industrial age of, IT and electronics to cyber physical systems, if you will. The Fourth Industrial Age by Klaus Schwab is a must read in countries like Korea, Taiwan, China, and should be here in the US as well. We need new models of engagement. We don't need to put boxes on kids' heads like they're doing in India to keep them from cheating. We need new ways of teaching and learning. We don't need parents climbing the walls of a building, handing the test answers to their students, their children who are sitting in the classroom taking these standardized tests. Education should be, a lot more effective than that. We need to create effective learning environments. We need to create ways to get students to engage and interact and not just throw things at each other, right? Where we're moving away maybe from lectures like this one towards projects and discussions and interactions and collaborative problem-based learning, if you will, with students in other countries. Well, 15 years ago, I ran a Wikibooks project with students from China, Taiwan, US, Malaysia, trying to think of what other countries. And 25 years ago, I ran the Interplanetary Teacher Learning Exchange. I had students from Peru and from Korea and from UK and Finland and the US, Indiana, all writing cases of problems they see in their schools and then solving each other's case problems. I created a couple different kinds of things like that. We need to get more, again, cross-institutional, cross-cultural interactions and engagements. That moves us from an age of teacher delivery of instruction, education 1.0, teacher as a guide, education 2.0, to education 3 or 4.0, where students are producing knowledge, they're creating knowledge, they're defining what knowledge is, they're generating. Just like generative AI, kids are making, they're in maker spaces, they're producing manuscripts or books or multimedia documents and podcast shows and YouTube channels and all sorts of things. So we move away from an educator as the source of knowledge with traditional essays and traditional exams and copyright clearance issues and all sorts of things, to education 2.0, we're using the Creative Commons, where things have been licensed to be open and interactive for anyone to download and use. Where the teacher is a guide to one's learning environment. There are consultants, there are concierges. You want to increase access to technology that augments one's learning, that extends one's learning, that transforms one's learning, that enhances one's learning. To education 3.0, where the teacher might be an orchestrator of a whole slew of things, like a museum curator I pointed out last week, where everything is free and open access and everything is flexible and open. Notice in here, I tried to make things flexible and open for you. This is not education 3.0 class, but I think it's on the way towards becoming maybe a 3.0. If I really opened it up and said, there's no syllabus, you guys create the syllabus kind of thing and define what it is. Now, my friend Julie Solomon, who has a book called E-Moderating and another book, E-Tivities, talked about this movement from education 1.0 to 3.0. So we move from knowledge transmission to an age where knowledge is socially constructed, as Christy was saying, to get students to interact about a problem or an issue or about a scenario and solve it with teams using formal learning and informal learning. We're using, self-discovery, self-directed learning, as well as peer-based encouragement and so forth. Blended forms of learning, meshing online and face-to-face physical forms of learning. And eventually we move to a lifelong 60-year curriculum of education 3.0, where students co-develop, co-research with one another and their instructor. They get involved in inquiry-based forms of learning with other teams of students and analyze water samples at a riverbed and make some recommendations to the local community or state or whatever you might be working with. You're preparing students for uncertain careers in the future. Again, look up Julie Solomon. She's a wonderful person. she's now most recently in Liverpool, but she was a Pro Vice Chancellor in Western Australia. She was in Southern Australia when I saw her last time in Melbourne. She's been around the world. She's helped the world think about, and she's a business professor originally. She's helped the world think about how to moderate in online. So if you're interested in how to moderate online, she's got books on that. So now we move to Rovi Brandon's notion of, this career curriculum continuum. Rovi Brandon graduated from IST a decade and a half ago or so, maybe longer. He thought he graduated. He had to come back and finish another class, but that's another story for another day. Hopefully it won't happen to you. He's been an associate dean at Wisconsin. He's helped run the Advanced Distributed Learning Lab, ADL lab in DC. Now he's the vice provost at the University of Washington, which has one of the largest outreach and extension programs in the country because they're one of the first. He's changed the name of the college from Outreach and Extension to the Continuum College. And he was a guest maybe in this class last year, I probably in my 6, 7, 8 class. I've got a recording from him. He's been on my podcast show. You'll find him in Silver Lining for Learning. He says, we got to look at just small units of learning. This YouTubeversity, Arizona State's, people are learning from YouTube videos and they're getting credit for it. YouTubeversity, I think they call it. So, this stuff is repackaged and reused, just like I'm recording this now and I can reuse it next year. Short courses, micro credentials, nano degrees, certificates. People don't want to go to college for a 4-year degree or 10-year degree to get their PhD. They want something short that they can put on their resumes and get a position from it. So we have to move from these, video watching and, YouTube sharing and so forth to getting, boot camps and learning computer programming to graduate degrees. There's a continuum there. They cost increasing amounts of money, as you'll notice in here. And again, we're moving from an agricultural age to an industrial age to a knowledge economy and on to innovation society, right? And so actually a little humor here, Chulalongkorn University in Bangkok has asked me to speak there a couple of times. It's called the Pink University. Pink is their colors. And every time I go there, they said, Dr. Bonk, could you speak on Education 3.0? Well, they didn't know what 3.0 was, so I made some up. Next time I went back, could you speak on Education 4.0? Everyone's always striving to be something, better and moving towards a target, but they really didn't know what it meant. It was for me to define and try and find out. So it's the innovation producing age is 4.0. And again, I mentioned the 60-year curriculum. There's Rovi Brandon on the right, who's one of the authors of the 60-year curriculum, basically learning for a lifetime, right? Learning for one's lifetime. I got about 15 minutes left before we take a break, take a couple questions. Then I'll probably have to finish this up next week. Today, we've got the rise of the phygital learner, someone who's savvy in the digital world and who's savvy in the virtual world. Someone can walk in and out of either world without really realizing they're currently in that digital space and on their mobile phones, like some of you have been since class started. And others of you are quite happy and savvy with the physical spaces around you. Well, as instructors, creating learning environments, we have to think about Generation Z and ZZ or Generation Y, who are expecting us to integrate technology seamlessly, whether it's TikTok or ChatGPT, or some other new and exciting technology. And then frontiers of teaching and learning continue to grow and to change. And it's hard to get a bearing on it sometimes. And that's why my tech variety framework, that's why the R2D2 model and the Education 2020 framework are 3 ways that will help you make sense of the possibilities both today and 10 years from now. They'll still exist. The technologies can change, but those models should still bear some weight. They're ignorant of the technologies, let's say, sort of. So, we can talk about, the value of TikTok or ChatGPT on and on and on, and yet there'll be things that replace it soon enough. We're going to talk about this young boy who graduated, the youngest to graduate from college at Fullerton College at age 12. What were his learning environments like? What were his learning principles like? What enabled him to succeed in a different way or a faster way, maybe a more economical way than others his same age or others have gone before? What's going on in society which is enabling people to do feats like this that weren't even imaginable when I was going through school? How are we rethinking educational systems? And we'll have people from IU come in and talk about active learning spaces at IU. And I just talked to someone who created active learning in Hong Kong, and she may come in and present the active learning spaces at the University of Hong Kong too. So as I was saying earlier to one of you that, we might add some things. So, moving away from desks and rows towards more of a cafeteria or cafe style of learning, like at a Starbucks or at a Barnes and Noble or someplace else, to engage the senses, let people be free, let people move about, let people make choices, don't constrict as much. So maybe in the chat window, you would put one of your principles might be being, free and open to move, or less constrictive of learning, trying to make learning more attractive for individuals. Now, Steelcase is one of the vendors that IU uses, in particular School of Ed, for our new classrooms. If you visit our library, it's just been remodeled, and I was involved in a couple of classroom remodeling efforts at the School of Ed. We use Steelcase, and they've got some brilliant classroom designs, and you can see here the data they just collected. This just came out in June, indicates that, active learning spaces let people be more creative, facilitates problem solving, collaboration with others, communication skills, and so forth. So it's critical to think about the hardwiring, how we arrange our desks and chairs. This is very important. And we'll get at that when Tracy Birdwell comes and talks to us in week 7 or 8. There's a whole bunch of IU articles for that week. And so they talk about, how education leaders are rethinking space and rethinking the design and use of such spaces. The past decade has shown us a whole wide range of classroom spaces. If you go to some of the articles for that week, or if you go to just Steelcase itself up in Michigan, Christy, I think they're not too far away. They're maybe northern, it might be Grand Rapids or something like that. We may take a trip up there and look at such spaces. So we have to think about these, millennial kids is going to expect us to create these rooms that, we have a meditation room in the new library space. So well-being is very important. Human connectedness is very important. Thinking about hybrid forms of learning that are enabling, enhancing, and enriching our communication with and among others out there. So how can we democratize education? Stanford has been thinking about that with their MOOCs. One idea that's come about during the past couple of years is the Code in Place project. We interviewed the people at Code in Place who designed it for our podcast show, and so you can watch that podcast show. I think I got it listed in the syllabus. Recently, it's exploded. They've had 30,000 students over the past 3 years learn about coding, and they've all had volunteer instructors. They've had thousands of voluntary instructors teaching it. So all these people are learning coding for free with voluntary teachers. Now, that's a pretty cool thing. They're learning about something that's got ramifications, got job ramifications behind it. So they can get a good salary if they learn Python programming and maybe some other programming languages as well. So, this is something where Stanford's giving back to society. Many universities are adopting such models. Harvard is too. MIT, of course, is, and others. If we start looking at the Code in Place project, you can, actually there are 2 articles linked there. If you download my slides, you can click on, and there's a couple videos embedded in there, so you can listen to the authors. You can also go to the podcast show, and it'll have that as well. Also, what's happening today, and where my research is today, is on learning languages online. So I've been studying Duolingo, for instance, got a couple publications there. I'm now studying how YouTubers like Grace here and like the gentleman, the woman on the right, are teaching online Mandarin or Spanish or Italian or some other language, English in particular. Japanese is probably one of the top languages taught online, by the way. You might be surprised to hear that, Emily. But we've interviewed 19 YouTubers this summer. I've got 3 papers written, a 4th one on the way, including Grace. There was one of the ones we interviewed. Grace was a student at IU for a short time, maybe a Fulbrighter or intern. And has started her own company. In effect, a lot of these people start their own company teaching languages, and they're using ChatGPT to learn languages and to teach languages. And so we interviewed them about that. You can click and watch the video explaining some of that there. Okay, now I'm going to ask you, what are you reading? I want you to post in the chat window, what's one book related to education that you've read in the past year or two that you liked? It's a book you read that you liked. Okay. Curious to see what people are putting in the chat. I haven't been keeping up. Originals. I had that in here. I deleted it from the list. Originals. Yeah, good. Glad somebody had originals in there. Is my voice breaking up, Carol? Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me, Bo? I'm okay? Great.
I think I might have too many windows open. Did anybody else have problems? No? Yeah, that's for me.
I'm
Sorry.
trying to speak right at it because my computer, I cannot go like this because you can't hear it. I have to look right at it. So I'm purposely looking at the screen or trying to.
Close the windows here.
Okay. So we've got learning by design, understanding by design, thinking fast and slow. Okay, good. So what are you reading?
We have work to do.
We've got work to do. Okay, thank you, Gandalf. So one book that's popular, it's been popular for a decade, is the book called Drive, Daniel Pink's book about freedom, challenge, purpose, life as play, intrinsic motivation, autonomy. If you get the book Drive, he interviews people who came up with a theory on intrinsic motivation. He interviewed Edward Deasy and Richard Ryan at the University of Rochester to come up with his ideas on motivation 3.0, just like education 3.0. You want to build purposeful forms of learning, passion in one's learning, the 3 Ps, play in one's learning, and get people to, celebrate learning and get interested in learning again, not be regimented and so forth. There we go. Second book is Angela Duckworth's book called Grit. Angela Duckworth is someone who's gotten really a lot of attention because of her ideas about grit and perseverance and how it wins the day, and having a growth mindset as well. Carol Dweck's book, Growth Mindset, is another one that parallels the 2 books together. And she's got a great TED Talk if you've not seen it. But again, so these books are all coming out on motivation and creativity. In fact, Creativity Inc. by the Pixar founder is one of the best books I've read in the last 2 decades. It's got a lot of principles around Pixar's success. So Ed Catmull comes from the higher ed scene and takes Pixar and puts higher ed in it basically merges higher ed and corporate in one place, in effect. And so he creates an atmosphere where creativity is embraced, where entrepreneurship is embraced, where people are free to do whatever they want up to a certain dollar amount. They can create all sorts of new movie ideas, and they'll get support for doing so. And he has a set of principles that underlie his teams, and you can go online and get these, or you can buy the book and just read the appendix. All you have to read is the appendix. It's got all of his ideas in there. It's not the manager's job to prevent risks. It's the manager's job to make it safe for others to take them. You see, so a different mindset to get people to cultivate entrepreneurship and innovation and so forth. Tony Wagner, who's a kind of Harvard-related professor, I think he's adjunct at Harvard, maybe just regular tenure line, but I think he's clinical maybe. He's got several books about innovators and creating, one called Creating Innovators, and getting kids be successful in the innovation age. And again, passion, purpose, and play. He looks at kids' lifestyles well, he reflects back on people who in their 20s and 30s became successful, and then has them reflect back on their life experiences, on their environments, on their learning environments growing up. And so his books are rather valuable to take a look at. Both Tony and Ted Dintersmith, who's a co-writer with him, were on Silver Lining for Learning 2 years ago, maybe 1 year ago, with their new book. So, many of you have heard of Sir Ken Robinson because he had the #1 TED Talk in the world, and he has his books on creativity and finding your element, finding your passion, finding your elements. What matches your interests, your talents, your strengths. Out of Our Minds, Learning to Be Creative, and other books that he's got as well. And he has his principles of teaching and learning. Having a free and open exchange of ideas is something I totally agree with. Encouraging people to express their feelings and ideas, and not indicating whether they are right or wrong, or right away. Just let people play with ideas and hitchhike on each other's ideas to get them to think differently and passionately. And he talks about how schools kill creativity and don't allow us to express our risk-taking selves. So schools exist to help us exhibit our safekeeping selves and not our risk-taking selves. We enter schools as 5 years old, very risk-taking, and we leave them as high school students be very safekeeping, especially after graduate school in particular. My colleague, Charlie Regaluth, and his daughter, Jennifer Knopp, Charlie had the office next to mine forever. He's probably the most famous instructional design author in the world. He's got several green books that you might want to buy. He retired a few years back, and he's now mainly looking at reinventing schools and systemic reform in schools. And he has a book called Reinventing Schools, It's Time to Break the Mold. So people are talking about creativity, motivation, entrepreneurship, innovation, and transforming schools, changing schools. Let them be courageous adventures, as my friend Jenny Majoria, who's now with Google for Education. She was on my podcast show a few months ago, talking about the new report Google for Education has on the future of ed. And she's up in Chicago. She was in inner city Chicago working with kids there, where she won awards. She also did something with the Obama administration in the laptop program back 10, 15 years ago. She's been around a number of places. She's still a very young person and is worth reading. I endorsed her book, Courageous Adventures. And Michael Horn, he's another one that you might want to, take a look at. Michael Horn has a podcast show and a blog that's daily. He talks about how schools are changing, and he worked with Clayton Christensen of Harvard on a book called Disruptive Class. And Clayton Christensen is known for disruptive innovation, how companies, get disrupted by younger companies that have a new product or whatever. And he takes his ideas about disruptive innovation to the schools and how schools need to change, and might change through blended learning, might change through micro-credentials, might change through flipped classrooms, or whatever it happens to be. And so Michael's, one of his new books is From Open to Reinvent, creating or recreating school for every child. And then number 10, again, go back to Tony Wagner, Learning by Heart. So we're getting emotional learning, transforming learning, risk-taking forms of learning, reinventing schools, creativity, motivation, passion. All these things are embedded. If you go to Barnes & Noble, if you go to Borders bookstore, I don't think Borders still exists, but if you go to a bookstore nowadays, you actually walk in a bookstore or go to the online Amazon store. Just these are the kinds of books that are out there over and over and over again. And I think that the 10 books I laid out, I had 20, I deleted 10 of those, including the couple that you all mentioned. I think they all relate to my Education 2020 model. And it looks like I'm going to be running out of time here before we get to that, but learning is changing in front of our eyes. We're moving away from solitary forms of learning to sharing our learning, to working with others, to collaborating with one another, to the space where I'm calling Education 2020. And it's something that I'm still working on and still thinking about and have not published on. And so I need you to keep quiet. I need you not to publish my idea. No, you can, if you want to write a book and publish my ideas, by all means. I'm never going to get to it.
Keep it secret. Keep it secret.
Hopefully you can keep it secret for a little bit. we're moving away from instructor as a credit manager or a judge, of one's learning. In my other class, 511 class, my TA in there said, well, I'll keep track of everyone's contributions every week, how engaged they were, and I'll write down what everyone's engaged on. I said, no, don't do that. I said, let's look at all the topics that people discuss. What topics are they discussing, and what do they find interesting for the particular week? And so we're moving away from constantly judging whether people participated or didn't participate, how many times. Just make a community of it, and then you are an instructor, as a counselor, guiding them along the way. You can come, or students can come to you for advices, for help and suggestions when they're lost, when they need some help, or act as a consultant, offering resources, or offering some examples, some stories, some of your expertise, if you will, to the team, and become part of the team, if you will. Or maybe orchestrating all the resources together as an orchestra conductor, taking all the different components that is available to you. I mean, all the stuff in your syllabus is free, every article. Taking all this free and open content out there, and free and open technology tools, and all these experts around all over. Every week they'll come in. You're an orchestra conductor, linking them all together, or you're a course ambassador. When my course is done, it's up on the web. Anyone can use it. Everyone who puts their content online. And by the way, when the web first happened, faculty rebelled at many places. UCLA, they protested. They had protest signs. They didn't want to put their syllabus online. They were mandated, the humanities faculty had to put their syllabus online. 1997, there was a big thing in the Chronicle of Higher Ed, how mad they were about putting a syllabus online. Well, that was level 1 or level 0 of integrating technology of the web. I wrote an article on the 10 levels of web technology integration. Eventually became 12 levels, just from syllabus or part of a course to a graded component of the course to the whole course to shareable course, blah blah blah. If you want to read it, putting a whole program up. And we're course ambassadors. Those who do MOOCs, like I did a MOOC to 4,000. Some people do MOOCs to 400,000 people. They're ambassadors of their course content. They're sharing with the whole world this content. There's a professor at Penn State. He had 100 students in his class, and he put in his anatomy class, he put all these tests, self-testing, practice tests on the muscular system, on human anatomy. He had 100 students, but yet he had 200,000 people use that website. He's a course ambassador to the world. We're also curators, finding the golden nuggets, finding those important stuff and making it available for other students and other people to use and to examine and to reshape, remix, reuse in some way, shape, or form. We're also concierges, like at a hotel, making suggestions for students and where they might look for new information and new special issues, in our case, that might have just come out, or new books that came out, or a podcast show, or a conference event, or a symposium, or a concierge saying, this looks pretty good. Why don't you try this? It's raining out today. Use an umbrella. But try it anyways. We're all concierges. If a teacher doesn't look at, if an instructor doesn't look at him or herself as a concierge, you're doing a disservice to students, because that's really all you are. You're challenging students and you support them in the challenges. We're camping trip guys. I used to start my classes off with the Who. There's an old rock group which has a song called Magic Bus, and I play the Magic Bus song every time to start and end class. We're camping trip guys. We take students on every week. I'm taking on a trip to a different journey and different topics, and let you to have for a view a couple articles, and you get back in the bus and we go on to the next destination. And you take a look and you have lunch and breakfast and you digest a few things. You get back in the bus, you go to the next destination. So we are camping trip guides. If you want to be effective, you better have a good expedition. You better find out in advance, be an adventurer, and stake out some interesting scenarios or possibilities for your audience, your students, and people who might join. We're cultivators growing plants and crops. We all are cultivating, new ideas among our students and watching them grow. And so those are 8 of the 20 roles that in my Education 2020 model that get at, these 20 new roles of the instructor. Curator, counselor, concierge, coach, chemist, cultivator, change catalyst. I didn't talk about that. Chemist, I didn't talk about that. you know, consumer advocate. All these are C words like the word Curt and Chang and other words, you know, so they're all C words. So these are the starter for Education 2020. I'll give you next time, I'll go through the 20 principles behind Education 2020 model. And yeah, we'll the assembly of these different visions of what an effective instructor is in this digitally rich age is exciting. It's really exciting to be a member of the community of 2020. I want to say 2023. 2023 is an exciting time to be an instructor. A frustrating time when things don't work, technology, you know, challenging time, but it's a time to be the most creative. This is the most creative instructors have ever been on the history of this planet right now. And you know, to be members of it with me in this class is, you know, really unique experience and should be fun and enjoyable, as well as a challenge. Learning is effortful. It should be challenging for all of us, right? And so hopefully you'll feel it. You'll feel tired sometimes. If your brain isn't feeling mushy sometimes in this class, I've not done my job right, okay? So I'll get at the Merrills next time. Yeah, if you're not feeling a little mushy in the brain from any of my courses, any week in the course, then I'm not doing my job. So you should feel like something's going on up there that's causing some dissonance, maybe with your traditional teaching methods, maybe with some ideas that you read about or research you've read in the past. Maybe you can disprove maybe some of the things that I've said. But that's half of the model. That's the instructor side. Now we got to think about the student side and what they're doing, the principles. And I'll get to that next week. Questions or comments, confusions, clarities. Anyone? And how are we doing in terms of the chat window here? I haven't monitored the chat, Bo. What's important to mention in the chat, Bo?
We've got the Jamboard reposted in there. We had some good book recommendations, it looked like, when you asked for those earlier. We were asked, somebody, let's see, I think it was maybe Rachel had asked about the possibility of taking the politicization out of education potentially down the road, if it was even possible. We had a conversation about the Hamilton County School Board and John Green and the library fiasco that took place. Let's see. Madison threw in one with the is it called the Odin Project, Madison? Is that right?
Yep, that's right.
Awesome. That looked like a really cool website for web development. I could have used that this summer for my computer science course, actually. Let's see here.
Thank you, Madison. I've heard of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a good conversation so far.
Yeah, good. And Rachel, the answer is one by one. It'll happen one by one. It's got to start with somebody, apolitical school somewhere. And I'm sure it already exists somewhere. And just has to be promoted and has to be better understood, you know. Hopefully we'll see, you know, young people in this world is not going to put up with a lot of the crap that they see happening today, and they're going to want something better, you know. So
Rachel was kind enough to drop in the Who album.
Oh,
yeah.
So she's really dated me. Thank you, Rachel. At least Rachel and I remember it along with Bob. Any other comments? Okay, Amen is here in the chat. Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute break, I think. Bob, why don't you comment on it for a minute here? What did you remember from, you've heard me before present on that. Is there anything that struck you as different? I had a lot of new data. Anything that struck you as important, Bob?
You mean Bob P. Me?
Yeah.
No, it's always good to hear it a second time and the historical perspective. I think what's jumping out at me is the question that we talked about in our Saturday class, and that is, what are the potential adverse impacts of the technology in increasing divides between haves and have-nots, not just flattening? So will we see technology go higher for those who have access and lower for those who who don't.
Yeah.
That's what's jumping out at me. But no, you've got the same, although I think you've changed your group, your rock group. I think you used somebody else last time.
About we did. You know, MOOC research in particular showed that was more experienced, higher educated people who were accessing MOOCs than people who on the other end of the digital divide that really needs that such access. So that is true, but it wasn't 100%. I mean, it depends. There's always an it depends out there, you know, in terms of educational research, in terms of what kind of class, you know, where it was being taught, how it was advertised and marketed, how it was funded. I mean, all sorts of things. It depends. But we need to take a 5-minute break and come back for our guests here. So why don't everyone I'm going to stop the recording here on part 1 and going to send this up to the cloud. End of part 1.